I'd like to start by introducing my friend and colleague, Sheena Lyons. I'm excited to introduce Sheena. She's an executive consultant at Workforce Science Associates. She has over a decade of experience working with senior leadership teams and frontline managers to drive organizational results through their people, both related to talent, selection, development strategies, as well as employee engagement initiatives. Please join me in welcoming Sheena as she shares her valuable experience with us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to continue this series of The Data is In, Now What? And today's focus is really going to be about enabling leaders at every level. So we know that employee listening programs generate valuable data, but the challenge lies in translating those insights into meaningful change across your organization. Different leadership levels require different types of information and support to drive effective action. And what resonates with a CEO won't work for a frontline leader. So this session will equip internal project teams and HR professionals with the knowledge to become those trusted advisors who can speak the language of every leadership level. So you'll learn how to tailor your insights to match what senior executives, business unit leaders, and frontline leaders care about most. And most importantly, how to provide each group with actionable recommendations that they can realistically implement within their sphere of influence. So this slide provides a visual context to why this topic is important. As leaders at differing levels of an organization have differing viewpoints, thus the information that flows through these leadership levels needs to be focused through the lens in which they're using to view and drive change within the organization. So just like with today's conversation, we're going to start with that senior executive leadership level. They have that strategic focus for moving the organization forward and elevating the employee experience at that 30,000-foot view. Then we have our business unit leaders or department leaders who have a more operational focus at that 10,000-foot view in order to drive performance excellence and engagement. Then we have those ever important frontline leaders at the ground level who are focused on the daily functioning of their individual teams. So what we're going to talk about today involve insights when it comes to a pretty standard engagement or employee experience survey program. So it is certainly not an exhaustive list of all of the things that each leader cares about at every level, but more so focused on those insights directly stemming from their core listening program. So let's start with those senior leaders and how to best present insights that really capture their attention. Of course, looking at those enterprise-wide engagement trends, helping them understand how did we do? What is that current state of engagement? And how does that compare to previous years if we've measured this before? Competitive positioning data, think benchmarks. The right benchmarks really help put results into context to better understand how we're positioned as an organization and what might stand out as a particular strength or opportunity area. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a room where leaders ask the question of how does this compare to companies like ours? Looking at those risk indicators, where are the areas that employee sentiment could really impact our business reputation or performance? Leadership bench strength. Leaders really care about succession planning as they have that eye toward the future. Provide those insights that help them understand the strength of leadership and where development needs might exist across the enterprise. Cross-functional patterns help them see those demographic insights that might impact strategic planning efforts. Are there tenure differences, generational differences, differences based on geographies at a multi-site organization? Linkage of survey data to business outcomes such as retention, productivity, customer satisfaction. This is often the most neglected, yet one of the most powerful metrics for senior leaders. And it seems intuitive that employee and customer business metrics are correlated, but it's so incredibly powerful to present that in the form of your own company data to tell the story that really emphasizes the power of investing in the employee experience. And this is something we really love to support our clients in doing and providing those linkage pieces. And then last but not least, they need prioritization analyses to really help focus efforts where the impact is going to be greatest when it comes to important outcomes. And within an engagement survey, generally you'd want to be looking at those key drivers of engagement or key drivers of retention as key outcomes to really focus those action planning efforts. So how do we connect that feedback back to impact? It's presenting that so what business case. How are we connecting those insights to strategic objectives or business metrics? It's framing those recommendations as competitive advantages and what's part of that employee value proposition of the organization. Then it's providing strategic action categories. Here we're looking at strategies focused on enterprise-wide programs to really shift or elevate culture or systems and structures of how the organization is set up. Leadership development priorities, to name a few. Again, it's that 30,000-foot view. And then having that communication strategy of how are we going to message the changes and the priorities enterprise-wide. Now, it's really important to keep information high level because, again, that C-suite has the 30,000-foot view. So their actions need to be focused on that broader whole. And many are going to still have that inclination to want to dive deeper into more granular insights. And that's really valuable as they think about their respective teams. But as an executive group, they need to focus their attention and align around those enterprise-wide initiatives. Now, how can action planning look at this level or key ways to move forward? Connect those initiatives to strategic goals. Make it fit with what's important to leaders, what's already on their radar. Think about executive sponsorship for certain initiatives, identifying who will champion what. This really sends a message of the importance of the initiative to the workforce when it has that executive sponsorship. And it's also a key way for those executive leaders to stay involved in the action planning and implementation as well. Cross-functional task forces, assembling teams from across the organization to address systemic issues and come up with solutions. And then having really clearly defined success metrics. What are those enterprise level KPIs that connect to business outcomes so we're keeping our eye on the ball and we know where we stand along the way? Then we have our business unit or department leaders to consider. These are often going to be your directors, your VPs of function. They really need data that they can use to improve their team's performance and translate organizational goals into day-to-day improvements. So of course, presenting them with department engagement trends compared to the organizational average. What's the engagement of our group? How does that compare? And how is it trending? Again, if we've measured this before. Team effectiveness metrics, things like collaboration, communication. How does the team function together within the broader group? But then how are they functioning within the context of other teams as well? Are there things that could be getting in the way of working well together and getting work done? Manager effectiveness within their sphere of influence. How are managers perceived as they're leading their teams? Looking for retention patterns. Are there flight risk areas where they need to focus on retention efforts? Are there particular job families that are more at risk for leaving, or geographies, or different tenure components? Looking at development and career progression satisfaction. What are the perceptions around how people see themselves growing within the function and within the broader company? We know this is such an important component in the employee experience. Workload capacity insights. What are the team's perceptions around those current workloads? Does there seem to be over or under resourced areas that really could be impacting their experience based on what's happening within the organization? Barriers to productivity. Do they have what they need to succeed? Are there things like lack of resources or lack of training that's creating some inefficiencies and preventing work from being done right and well? And then just as with senior leaders, they also need prioritization analyses to really help focus those efforts where the impact is going to be greatest when it comes to key outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So again, turning those into action, connecting it to impact. Show clear connections to these leaders between employee feedback and department KPIs. How does it connect? How do the insights help us achieve what we are setting out to do as a group or function of the business? Compare their performance to other similar departments to, again, get that relative comparison. Highlight areas where improved employee experience will directly impact unit and department outcomes. And sometimes some of these conversations are about creating buy-in with leaders, helping them see why it matters and how it connects to things that they're already focused on. And then it's about providing those tactical action categories. This could come in the form of team development initiatives, process improvements, reallocating existing resources, management practice changes, cross-functional collaboration. Again, just to name a few of those more tactical action categories at this level. And then those action planning essentials. For this group, it can be really impactful to identify some of those 90-day quick wins or those low-hanging fruit components that really demonstrate responsiveness of we're listening, we heard you, and here's what we're doing about it. Of course, within the impactful areas that we identify. Thinking about processes, how do we optimize our efforts and make improvements to how work gets done within the area of the business? And then coaching and development support. Business unit leaders manage through other managers. So success really requires them in helping to equip and empower their direct reports to lead change within their teams. Now for those frontline leaders who are so important in this process, how do we best position data that they can confidently discuss with their teams and use to create positive change? So of course, those individual team scores. How do we compare to the department, the organization? What's that trending? And then it's about those team dynamics, trust, collaboration, communication, those kind of normal components of how teams function. Manager effectiveness becomes a very personal metric here. How am I perceived as a manager? What is that manager scorecard? Team-specific strengths and opportunities. Where do we excel that we really need to reinforce and leverage? And where do our opportunity areas exist as a team? Resources and support. Again, do people have the tools, the training, the information that they need to do their work? The areas of recognition, appreciation, and development. These are things that leaders can really directly impact, and typically they're some of the most impactful things as well. How are those perceived within the team? And then again, that prioritization piece is so important and still critical for frontline leaders so that they know what matters most to their team. It's how we really point them in the direction and stack the odds in their favor that when it comes to turning insights into meaningful actions. So some of those key components to really turn it into impact is making it personable and actionable. Leaders need to be able to connect with it and feel that it resonates. And so how do we make it really about their team and not enterprise trends? Helping them really focus on where they can directly influence with their teams, as well as those behavioral changes of how they as leaders and the team functions, rather than thinking about those broad systematic overhauls. Providing them with those conversation starters and discussion guides, as well as offering them concrete examples of what have other leaders done where they've seen success, other managers in our organization. How can they really learn from one another and build off of examples that are known to work? And then it's providing those immediate action categories. So this could look like one-on-one enhancement with individual team members and how they just engage in groups versus individual settings. Team meeting optimization, communication improvements, or opportunities with existing resources. And then those action planning essentials, the team discussion planning, really helping them understand how to share their results and co-create those action plans. A lot of times this is where HRBP support becomes critical. It's also an area where we've got a full suite of services to really help support managers do that as well. Helping them understand, what do I need to ask for from my manager or for the organization in order to be successful? Obviously, within reason, it still needs to be within their realm of control, but what does that support look like? Knowing, how are we going to monitor improvement? What is that tracking method going to look like? And then really making sure that they understand and we reinforce that one conversation doesn't create change. It's really that ongoing dialogue that's going to drive continuous improvement. Now, as we continue to think about that frontline leader level where action is so critical, there's a few additional points that we wanted to share in terms of how can organizations and teams really best support these managers to turn those insights into action. And so some common pitfalls to really help leaders avoid starts with them creating too many actions. That's distracting and that's going to set them up for failure. Having them avoid focusing solely on scores rather than underlying experiences. It's the experiences that help make it feel personable and actionable. It can't just be about numbers. This is about people and their experiences. We don't want them making plans that require resources not available within the team and or setting those timelines without considering the team bandwidth and capacity. We want to make this realistic to achieve based on existing pieces on their plates. We also don't want them to develop and implement plans to their teams. We want to make sure that they're developing and implementing plans with their teams. It's that co-creation where they'll really get the buy-in. Then there's a lot of aspects regarding the support of managers and what organizations need to do and provide to set them up for success. And so some of those key pieces are all about data interpretation workshops. Again, this is an area where we'd love to help managers understand how to work through their data. It's also giving them decision-making authority when it comes to their actions, as well as the time to do so. Managers need to know that they can make it a priority and take the time to do this, among other things. Having peer manager networks where we're learning from one another, we're talking about successes and challenges. We've had clients where we've facilitated sessions for this exact purpose, where we bring together managers across the organization after they've had a chance to kind of work through some action planning to talk about what's working, what's getting in the way, what are those shared or different experiences. And it was also an opportunity to just help people feel like they're not alone, the camaraderie and feeling united in that process. Again, getting them those action planning and conversation guides and setting those clear expectations. What are they expected to do and how is it going to be measured? And then very importantly, they need to hear senior leader messaging that reinforces the importance of this work. It has to be a priority that starts at the top. Now, one of our main objectives when supporting our clients is to elevate them within their organizations as they drive their survey program. We like to make our partners shine within their internal network. And so what are some of those universal principles and practical approaches that really help those internal teams build credibility, become trusted advisors, and create that lasting impact, regardless of which level they're working with? So starting with their priorities, frame the insights around what each level and leader cares about most. Provide those clear next steps. Don't just present problems, but help offer solutions. Make it relevant. Connect to their specific challenges and opportunities. Offer that ongoing partnership. Position yourself as a strategic advisor, not just a data provider. And then following up consistently. Check in on implementation and offer that additional support. Then as we think about making that continuous impact, think about yourselves as insight translators. Help leaders see patterns they might miss. A lot of times leaders are in their own, what's on their radar, but as we come in with outside perspective, we can help them catch things that normally they might not see. Anticipate those questions. Come prepared with responses for typical leader concerns. Provide that benchmarking context. Help leaders understand the relative performance, both from internal and external benchmarks. Again, offer that implementation support. Don't just hand off the recommendations. And then measure and report impact. Keep showing how the insights have led to meaningful change. And then lastly, building your credibility. Knowing your audience. It's about understanding each leader's communication style and preferences. Being hypothesis-driven. Come with those informed perspectives, not just raw data. Focus on that impact, again, connecting people insights to the outcomes. Maintaining that confidentiality. We continue to earn trust through how we handle the data and the confidential conversations. And then, of course, we've got to celebrate those successes. How are we recognizing leaders who take action and share their wins across the organization? Now, as we end our time together, I wanted to share a case study from an organization that I have had and continue to have the pleasure of working with. This is a global manufacturing organization made up of various operating companies. And after conducting their first annual engagement survey and turning insights into action at all levels, they achieved numerous positive outcomes. This client saw a 15% increase in engagement, a 14-point higher belief that change would occur from this survey. There was just much more optimism about voices being heard. They noticed a gap between male and female manager engagement, which closed by 8 points between those survey years. Those who saw action take place as a result of the survey responded 5.8 times more favorably when it comes to being inspired by leadership, as well as 4.4 times higher on their intent to stay with the organization. And then lastly, after noting a general discrepancy between male and female engagement, they saw that their efforts resulted in female engagement growing at 3 times the pace than that of males, which created a more equal experience in that next year. Now, many of you are probably asking, what did they do? And yes, those specific actions are really important. And within this organization, it was a lot of different things. Some of those focus areas were definitely on women and manager engagement, empowerment, and development that we know had a ripple effect. Growth and development and recognition initiatives and really amplifying those throughout the organization were focal points as well. But I think most importantly, what employees saw was a commitment from leadership. It became really clear to the workforce, to me as well, in working with them and joining them on that journey. It became really clear that feedback and survey was a priority and that people were really held accountable to taking action. And they actually conducted a 6 months after that engagement survey, they conducted a pulse about the action planning efforts, asking things like, are managers taking action? Have you talked about results? Are people seeing change? To get that early indicator of where they were doing well and where they might need support. And so that survey itself signaled the importance of the initiative, and it already indicated early growth in many of these areas that we ended up seeing the sizable increase in their next survey. So I always love to celebrate them when I have that opportunity. So now, thank you all for, again, joining, but I'd love to open it up for questions that maybe have been chatted or things you're wondering about.
Hi, Sheena. Yes, actually, there are a couple of questions, but first of all, thank you so much for leading a really informative session. I've got a couple of questions for you that were in the chat. The first one, Sheena, if you could answer this. We require managers whose overall engagement scores or manager effectiveness scores fall below the company average to create action plans. Do you recommend that we require all managers to create action plans?
That's a really good question. And it's great that you're thinking about kind of that range of managers. And we do recommend that all managers create action plans. One, it creates consistent, and it also doesn't make people feel like they're singled out for being in a certain category. The thing to think about is those that do fall below that threshold, they might need a little bit of extra support in doing so. And so the support provided to those various groups might differ, but really encouraging all to action, because even those who are above that company average still have opportunities. And sometimes it's about leveraging strengths and taking that true strengths-based approach, which is great, but also seeing where are there opportunities to still have that continuous improvement.
No, that's great. Thank you. Second question, what if a manager says they don't have time to do anything with the survey results? What would you recommend in terms of how we kind of go about engaging them?
Yeah. Yeah, and that can happen. And a lot of times it's a result of a couple things. Truly, it feels overwhelming and they don't want to add yet another thing to their plate, or they might just not see the value in it. So acknowledge their reality, hear them out, and then help them get started by making it really concrete and minimal, even just those small steps getting started. We always say, let's crawl, then walk, then run. And as an organization, that applies, but also with certain managers, that's going to apply. Some are just going to be able to run at a little quicker clip than those who need a slower pace. So make it concrete and minimal, but also really connect it back to what's in it for them. Again, make it resonate and help them see the value of when you do this, this can be the outcome. This is what it connects to, and make sure those things are things that they care about as leaders in the organization.
And finally, I have one last question that just popped up. It's a two-parter. Part one, what is your guidance in ensuring that action planning is ongoing, not just after the results come in? And then secondly, how do you get leaders to not focus on just their lowest scores?
Yeah, two really great questions. So one, I'm going to actually start with the second piece and then go to the first. Um, Really, it's about that initial enablement, those data interpretation workshops. And again, this is something we love to support our clients doing and have trainings to do this, but we'll also reinforce this with clients that we work with, even if they don't have the full training. Really, it's thinking about impact. And I always say that not all things are created equal when thinking about the employee experience. And so the data within a really typical standard dashboard is going to be able to run that priority analysis to help leaders think about what's most impactful. And so encouraging them to focus there because we want to give them the biggest bang for their buck. They might be able to work on the lowest scoring item and see a little bit of improvement, but that doesn't necessarily translate to higher engagement, higher retention. Again, those key business outcomes. So it's really in that education up front. And then, of course, reinforcing that to focus on impact, not just score. And then making that ongoing, I always encourage people to engage their managers as well. So as their team action plans, they should share that plan with their manager as well as just another piece of conversation and drive that accountability. But also then as managers think about managing that down, they need to be asking the managers they're leading and embedding that progress and action planning conversation into regular performance conversations that they're having. So it just becomes another one of those kind of operational focus areas that we talk about, we evaluate progress, making it, just a regular component of what we talk about, just like any other goal. And so it really is on how we're setting that up as managers ourselves and talking about that.
We did have one more question that popped up. If you're okay with answering that as we wrap
Yeah.
up. It's a really good one too. Can you share any of the engagement activities that other companies did to close the gap between male and female results?
It's a really great question, and I thought I would probably get some questions more about this because it was such great result and jump from year over year. So I don't have a ton of specifics of it was X and it was Y, but I do know that as they focus broadly on kind of manager engagement and development, but there was a particular focus on women leaders. And I know that that really had a cascade then into just females versus males across the organization. I know they did a lot of like female development workshops. Again, manager development really focused on that female experience. So, getting them together and having it just being really focused, not on being a female leader, but just that audience themselves kind of rallying together and feeling unified. Um, that's the most specific component I have about that male to female. I think part of what was happening as well in this organization is, a rising tide lifts all ships. And as they were taking action in particular areas, it really, trickled down into a lot of things, even if they weren't saying, I'm focusing on X and expect to see X go up. Really, there was that ripple effect. And so I think part of that was the ripple effect of focusing on female leaders and driving that empowerment. Others saw that and felt it, even if they weren't leaders themselves, which kind of raised some of that as well.
Thank you,
So
Sheena.
much of that becomes so organization specific that it can be hard to truly, pinpoint it was exactly this and here's what we can replicate, but appreciate the question. And just again, thank you all for attending, and we're excited to announce our final webinar of the year, Elevating Engagement in 2026, the Employee Experience Trends You Need to Know, on December 10th. This one is an hour. It's not just a half hour. It is an hour at 1 to 2 Central. And that is presented by our co-founder and executive consultant, Chris Erickson. So we hope you all join us.